Welcome to the Clubroom once again. My name is Mark Moyer. We're brought to you by the Winning Again Academy. And today I've got a special guest. Well, he knows he's special, but he's also a guest. Brendan Harris. Brendan, quick little background on him. He's born and raised in a town in New York State, but upstate, called Queensbury. And he went to college, high school there. Went to college, William and Mary, did super well there, but also was actually a super smart guy, an amazing student, part of student athlete, along with the athlete part. And he was drafted way back in 2001. This seems like, 40 years ago, Brendan? But anyway, drafted back in 2001 by the Cubbies. He ended up making his major league debut in 2004. Amazingly, hit a ringing double to right center, I think it was, for his first hit. Always exciting, and I'm sure he'll remember that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Played with the Expos, played with the Nationals, played with, I think, pretty much every team in the major leagues, which is a testament to his demand, man. His demand is always there. Also, one of his first gigs was as a player development guy for the Anaheim Angels, California Angels, Angels of Anaheim, whatever they were. And on top of that, joined 76 Capital for a little bit, was part of Diamond Kinetics, but most importantly, and best of all, and so forth, he is now with a company called X10 Capital, and they do some really pretty cool stuff. We're going to talk about that. So in the, this was probably a super long introduction, Brendan, so I'll stop there. And why don't you come on and join us at the table? Just click on that, jump on in, and we're off and running here. All right. Thanks. Welcome, Brendan. And I'm pretty excited that we can actually hear each other and see each other, right?
Yeah, thank you for the kind words in the intro, and for not going with the decaf today. Good for you.
Yeah, I'm pretty amped up because you're here, but also because everyone else is here. Everyone's great. I like the Expos thing in the background. That's kind of cool. Look, going retro. I like that. And yeah, well, you were there for what, like a couple months, right? And then they shifted and moved.
Yeah, I was there for about a month and a half. The last year I got traded the deadline in 2004, and went to their AAA for 3 weeks, and then I was up, I think, end of August, and so the last 6 weeks of the year I was up, and for a while I was one of the last Expos to still be playing, but Bartolo Colon just wouldn't hang him up. And so I think he was the final Expo to still be playing at some time. But actually, I think he is still playing because I think he plays in winter ball.
Where is he playing?
I think he plays in winter ball, actually, in the Dominican.
God, he's one of my I think he's one of my idols because what's interesting about him is he's muy gordo, right? I mean, he's a little bit on the rotund side, but from what I heard anyway, there was when he was with the Mets in, I don't know, like 15, 16, somewhere in there. He was actually voted the most flexible Met. And I was like, how is that possible? But I guess, who knows? But so, playing in the, how much do you remember of, look, you played in a million ballparks and so forth, but I remember seeing a game up there in Olympic Stadium, and it just felt like, it was just like a concrete, like, I remember watching it on TV and stuff too, where you could hear the air conditioners. Like it was like this hum. It was like so not baseball-y, but what was it like to play there? Or did you even pay attention to that?
So I was 23 at the time. It was my first year that had been called up early in the year in 2004. And so I was super excited, but the way the league and the whole situation was handled was a disgrace. Yeah. I feel like the baseball can and would survive there, I think, with the right initiative and a new ballpark. Certainly the facility is pretty antiquated. But the way they had already taken some games away from them and played a bunch of them in Puerto Rico, and they had been talking about moving or contracting first and then talking about moving for at least 3 years. And so the fan base was right to be kind of put off by that. But what I remember about that is the last series of the year were 3 sellouts, and we played the Marlins. And there were great atmospheres and good to get to play in. And I think the last game of the year, I think it was the last game where fans got a little rowdy and a little chat that the team was leaving and started throwing a couple things on the field. And I actually was playing third base that day, and I got hit with a golf ball, and I brought it to in the foot. And I brought it to the umpire, and this is just kind of another reminder of, you're a rookie or you're placing the game. And so I brought it to the umpire. I feel like it was Cowboy Joe. I feel like it was who was the umpire, and he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and told me to throw it back. And then the next inning, Mike Lowell was playing third, and somebody threw another one, and he kind of brought it up the same thing, and so they stopped the game, they cleared the field for a little service announcement, So
you got the suck it up kid thing, and Mike got that's great. Oh my God, I wonder what it would be like to throw it back, because it's funny, now you see like the when someone hits a home run and the fan will throw it back onto the field. I think I'd be amused if then the outfielder picked it up and threw it back again. I don't know. And I don't think you guys are allowed to do that, but I still think that'd be fun. Well, look, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. There's a couple things I want to cover today that I think are pretty important for a lot of the people here. I mean, number one is, yes, we're going to talk a little bit briefly about your playing days, but more importantly, how did you prepare for your sort of life after sport while you're playing, but also as you retired and so forth. And then also a little bit more about what compelled you to want to further your education, and then leading to what you're doing now with X10 Capital. So sort of rewinding the tape a little bit. I mean, you played for several years. You played for a few different teams that, and I was joking a little bit, but you it's one of those things where some people say, geez, how do you deal with being cut or released so much? But you get over it because that there's always seemed to be a team that wants Brendan Harris on board, right?
Yeah, it was the first time you're traded is kind of a real peek behind the curtain of what a business it is, where I had and you make, because of the journey in the minor leagues, you almost become tighter with a lot of guys in the minors because you're on these long bus rides, and you're getting paid very little, and it's a new experience and it's fun, and you're still impressionable. A lot of guys aren't married yet, so it's fun. But I had all these guys I'd been with for 3 years, and it was our first pro experience. And then I walked into the office, and they say, "Hey, you're traded, and hey, good luck to you, blah blah blah." And it was kind of like, that's it, and so it kind of sours you in the game, but it's pretty common where you're kind of disposable assets, and it is what it is. And so then you get there, and in the tough part for me is it's not just meeting the new teammates, it's the new clubhouse guys, the strength guy, the trainers, the whole organization, and that becomes tiresome when you do have to bounce around a little bit. But listen, it goes with the territory, and you go where the jobs are, and not to quote The Godfather, but this is our chosen profession. And so you kind of like, it's fine.
Well, it's funny because then you go to the realtor and you say, they're like, how many year lease do you want to sign? You're like, no, it's more like a month or 2 months or whatever it is. So before I go much further, just a couple quick things. Number one, I know Matt's already on board with this, but in the Q&A section on the far right on your screen there, please feel free to put questions in there that you'd like to ask Brendan or myself. More importantly, or just importantly, if I plan on bringing you in to ask those questions, time permitting. If you don't want to be brought in, make sure you mention that, but otherwise I'll bring you in to ask a question or two. Also, we'll vote on them based on their level of intellect, interest, or lack thereof. So please make your questions as serious as possible and as interesting as possible. So there you go. That's that. So towards the end of your career, I mean, at what point did you start thinking, geez, I should start thinking about what's happening afterwards? Or did you even bother with that? Or what, tell me a little bit about that experience.
So when I was at Wayman Mayer in undergrad, I was a kind of a government or political science major in undergrad. And then I get drafted, and I get a little money in my pocket. And I was like, let me pivot a little bit to business side. And so I wanted to switch my major, and because I got drafted early and I went back and had to finish up, and the way it worked out, I wasn't able to switch the major. So going back and kind of furthering my business education was always something that I had planned on doing. I just didn't know how long I was gonna be playing. But then the last 2 years of my career were probably a little injury plagued and frustrating in terms of how they played out. I still thought I could probably play and fit in as a utility guy or a bench guy with the team, but certainly the amount of options at 34, 35 were kind of shrinking. And so I started setting off a path where I was still going to work out and look for teams, but I also wanted to kind of get the ball rolling in terms of business school applications. And so, I took the GMAT, started doing the essays, going to the interviews and doing all that. And so that was the odd way that I found out that I was not going to play anymore. Was I got the call that I got into Wharton, and so I said, "Oh, this is really cool. This is a great opportunity." I put the phone down, and I was kind of like, "Oh, I guess I'm not playing again or playing anymore." So, for me, I looked at it as the type of player I was, the type of career I had. That's going to get stale, within after after I'm out of the game, and I wanted two things really. I wanted to kind of expand the map. I never wanted to be dependent on baseball for a job or an opportunity. The way the season is, the length of the season, baseball can control you. It controls your time, where it's just it's not yours. And so
Right.
I didn't want to be dependent on that. I wanted to expand the map, and I wanted to see how many more opportunities were out there that I just wasn't, even aware of at the time. So that was kind of the one of the bigger reasons going back to school. And then as I looked for things, I at the time I lived in the kind of Northern Virginia area. I was looking at, locally, maybe Georgetown, William and Mary, maybe Maryland, this and that. And then the kind of athlete element, competitive element kicks in, and I start saying, wait a minute, if I'm going to commit to this, I was like, all right, I'm looking at NYU, Columbia, Wharton, and I can commute, close enough to them where I can get up to them and say, hey, I'm going to take a swing, see if I get in, and we'll see what happens, and then end up getting in, and that's obviously what I chose.
All right, dumb question, but I'll ask it. Do you feel that in the application process, are they looking at your William and Mary stats? Are they looking? I mean, is it something where they have a certain amount of slots available for retiring professional athletes? I mean, obviously prestigious school.
No, I think they are looking at your body of work, and I think grad school is different, where they're looking at your body of work and how if you can handle the workload that they're going to give you, and B, what are you looking to do, or how are you looking to use their degree and do good things after they're doing it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, where you kind of have to come in with a plan, but you also have to kind of make it known that you're open for these new opportunities, and if there's some kind of entrepreneurial type venture that you wanted to dive into, that you're open to new opportunities as well. So I spent a lot of time doing interview prep and what the message I wanted to get across, and some of it in terms of, look, the data that I was using in terms of game plan and watching trends, yes, was valuable, and to say I've been doing this stuff. But in terms of people that were either engineers in private equity or venture cap, before that, it probably didn't compare. There's a pretty good gap between those. But hey, it worked out.
Yeah, well, it sure did. I remember you telling me a story. We recorded a podcast a while back, and I remember you telling me, and it's really stuck with me, how you went into it where you were looking, at your class, like, sort of effectively on each side of you are people that are, oh my God, vice president of this and whatever it is of that. And you're like thinking, well, geez, I just played baseball, kind of a thing. But tell me a little bit about what it was like to go through, and just real quickly, but just give me an experience, what it was like to experience being in school again. And after having been basically out of school for several seasons or several years, right? What was that like?
It was great. I had a great experience. Met a lot of great people. It was hard. Certainly not being in class for 2 years. That was an adjustment getting back into it, and trying to be, efficient with your time and efficient with everything that you're doing. But what I loved about that experience was it taught you, and it gave me a new way of how to think. I started thinking in terms of, all right, not whether it's reading cases or different problems, not just what happened, but why it happened, what were different options, and in my opinion, what would be a better solution going forward, and just thinking in terms of solving problems or in identifying inefficiencies in either that market or a different kind of business. And so that was the best part, and just kind of getting that skill set back of how to think and how to kind of just think in terms of solving problems.
That's great. So, one of the things that I'm obviously a big fan of and I talk a lot about is the importance of having a strong network. And it doesn't need to be a massive network, but it's one where, and I don't necessarily like the word network because that makes it sound too businessy sometimes, but really having a circle of people that you can go to, whether it's friendly stuff, but also business stuff, but people that you can rely on. But then there's different rings of that network. But in your opinion, I mean, you played baseball, and obviously when you're playing a professional sport, you're approached by lots of people who want basically a piece of you, right? One way or the other. And you need to be very careful and you need to have your guard up with a lot of these people. But it's also, most of the athletes I speak to, they'll say, Mark, I didn't spend enough time actually growing my network while I was playing because I was focused on the game and I was focused on fending off some people. But in your case, do you feel that you had a chance to, or did you ever really spend any time meeting people in business and so forth while you're playing, or did that really not kickstart until, Wharton and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's a common problem and I think, comment from a lot of guys. And certainly, I wasn't done playing that long ago, but certainly the prevailing wisdom was, hey, you got to focus on what butters your bread, and if you're into all these things, that's taking away from your bandwidth.
Right.
On the field. So, a couple different points I want to make about that is there are a lot of people vying for your attention, and certainly with social media and the different avenues that they can get to you, it's easier to get to people than it ever was. And so players are right to be protective of their kind of privacy and their time. And so to that end, I tell guys yes, I get it. It's very common to be more than an athlete, but it's all right to be 100% focused on building your brand on the field. Nothing you do off the field is going to be as important as your production on the field. Now, certainly engaging with the fan base on social media, making appearances locally, getting yourself involved in community things that you play in is incredibly important.
Right.
But my advice to guys is to start slow. And so leverage even if you're a, average to below average major league player like I was, you leverage the celebrity of the league that you play in terms of your travel and relative to your interest, in terms of what cities. Every business owner, startup, whatever, is going to take a meeting at least, or take the call of a major league player, NFL player, what have you. So use that to your advantage, but at the same time, don't feel obligated to start your own foundation, to start your own podcast, and get kind of saddled with these huge things. I was great at showing up at other people's foundations or other people's things and networking there and bidding on items and networking and stuff like that. That's an awesome opportunity to play golf and then network there. So, get yourself out there and do things like that. But, don't get too far from what got you there, or you're building your brand on the field.
That's great. It's kind of like the same thing as a boat ownership, right? You don't want to be the guy that owns the boat. You like to be the guy that goes on other people's boats. That's a smart way around. Same idea. That's great, but well stated on that. Now, in terms of, you talked about the importance of developing your brand on the field and so forth. But once you retire, give me a little idea of like how you approached building your brand. And you've been retired for 5 or 6 years, give or take. Over the last couple of years, how do you work on branding yourself?
And so that's a good question. That was the second part of the branding that I wanted to get into. Once you're done playing, it's a totally different animal, right? And so for me, it took me a while to kind of learn how to do it. It's this mix of making a game plan and trying to and having the idea of, if you're going to an event or doing something like this, of who's going to be there, and then what you're looking to get out of it, and then not just who's going to be there, what's their business, and then maybe have an idea relative specific to that kind of starts up the conversation. Then the second part of that, I see somebody had mentioned that in the chat, but consistency, and don't be a taker in your networking. build a little bit of a relationship and a rapport, learn like people who have families and be able to make small talk like that. And when I was working with 76 Capital, Wayne was excellent at that. Hey, and he knew their first, hey, how's so-and-so doing with whatever, their little league, and, this and that. And so that's all part of this dance of networking, is be able to personalize it, build a relationship, but also kind of have a game plan where what you're looking to get out of it, and then find out how you can bring value to a relationship, right? And it's a two-way, and it's a two-way street in terms of these relationships. And there's nothing wrong with, tell me what you do and let's figure an intro sentence of, tell me what you do and let's see how we can help each other. And then you find the different pain points in their business, and maybe it overlaps with something that you do, and so that's a skill that I've at Wharton was like a soft skill, but sometimes it's the most important thing, because you can't, you might be a great at valuation or whatever, but if you can't get these interviews or build a relationship to get into that second level of the final job interviews, then nobody's going to know about that.
That's well stated. Well, look, I'm going to bring in one of the guys that has a question that really ties in with that a little bit. So, hey, Howard, why don't you go ahead and jump in and ask your question? Because I think that was pretty, very timely to jump in with that. So, Howard, how's it going?
Thanks, Mark. I don't know if this is good or bad. Brendan, we connected through LinkedIn. Good to meet. I'm sure we'll catch up afterwards.
Likewise.
And actually, I was talking about this very briefly with the table that I was at. So, so a guy like Trevor Bauer, who is clearly, I mean, he has game, but his focus of branding and engagement with fans, is kind of, his Bauer Bites, where he did, meals with players during spring training, and, I mean, some really cool content that he puts out. But like you said, I mean, is that just part of the evolution of the new player, or is that, because what was funny, I don't know if you saw the one he did with Kenny Lofton, but Lofton had a great line, because, he's sitting there with Joe Adele and Hunter Green, who are two up and comers, and Kenny Lofton's like, man, I think you just need to cut it out with all this social media mess. So, so it's just interesting, because you mentioned the branding piece, and clearly that's kind of what some of these guys are trying to do now. So I'll step out, but would love to hear kind of your thought on that.
Yeah, it can be a double-edged sword, right? I think largely, I think what Bauer is doing is pretty positive, because it's just not being done in Major League Baseball in terms of the individual brand development. That they're far behind what the NBA is doing, far behind what the NFL does from the league point of view. Maybe the individual players sometimes do it in the NFL, but largely the league understands that they have to grow their stars, and stars are what get eyeballs and drive, are the best content and drive revenue. I think you're always going to open yourself up to, if you spend seemingly it seems like you spend an inordinate amount of time either on social media or trying to produce or put things out there. Really up until this year, when you look at Trevor Bauer's numbers, they weren't of an Cy Young level pitcher, right? So he was taking a lot of heat for that. But at the same time, look, he's got a good following. I think you got to give credit to the agent. Rachel Luba's been very good in terms of his deal is really a 2-year deal for $85 million with a $17 million insurance policy on the third year. That because he's got opt-outs for each year. So that's an outstanding deal that she got for him, and in the way that I think she's building his brand and just kind of going to build opportunities from here. I think it's largely positive, and it also is easier for a starting pitcher who's only going out there every fifth day. But for the most part, I support it. Yeah, I think baseball has to find a way to do more of this.
Hey, thanks, Howard. Awesome question.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Yeah, of course. Hey, so it's interesting though, and I don't know. Do you think it's because you just mentioned a second ago that it had to do with some of the sports and so forth, but it feels like, baseball, and I think hockey's in the same way, where there's a tendency in both the sports where you usually, like the baseball player will always say, hey, well, Aaron Judge, you hit a game-winning home run. Oh yeah, but it's my team that, it's the instinct is usually not to say, yeah, I hit an amazing home run, didn't I? It's all about pushing it off on the team. And same with hockey, like, oh yeah, well, I couldn't have been in that position to score that game-winning goal unless I got that perfect pass that came from the other guy that made so. But I think sometimes in football, I was like, yeah, man, did you see my catch? That was amazing. Or, in hoops, it's like, that was amazing dunk, wasn't it? So, but that's what makes them sometimes an outsized personality. So it's interesting that Trevor's doing some of this, because I think, and I think what you're saying is right, that some of the, baseball needs a little bit of shot in the arm with some outsized personalities that are allowed to get a little bit more outsized. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the way it's set up in baseball is you just don't see Aaron Judge, for example. He can have an 0 for 4, 3 strikeouts. You just don't see NBA guys having that bad a night. So in some sense, baseball is a much more humbling game, and so you can't get too high or too low, and you have to kind of maintain this or that. There's also, and this is even Trevor Bauer, and I feel like Bryce Harper was getting on this track in terms of making baseball fun again. And Trevor Bauer's been out front again about, hey, if you want to pip a home run again, that's fine. He goes, just let me pimp walk off in a way that if I strike you out. So Tim Anderson's been a kind of a leader on this, and there's been a little bit of an antiquated, like I get it. There's a kind of respect for the way the game, the way the game's played, and this and that. But I still think we could kind of unshackle the players a little bit and allow them to kind of show a little bit more emotion in the game. And I think that would kind of play to what you've been talking about in terms of kind of beating their chest a little bit.
Well, and it's interesting because it's almost like you're asking a 23-year-old with all the spirit in the world to chill and don't, it's like, don't celebrate the home run you just hit to whatever it is. I mean, it's one thing if it's a 63-year-old or a 43-year-old or whatever it is, but man, when you're in your 20s and you've got all that energy and that excitement and so forth, and the league is kind of saying, no, don't do that. So I agree. I think they're starting to loosen the chains a little bit, which is nice to see. All right, I'm going to bring in another someone to ask a question. Why don't you come on in? Let's see. It's almost like I feel like I'm spinning a wheel or something wicked like that. But Trevor, why don't you jump on in and ask your question if you could?
Which question? I mean, you stole my first one, so I'll ask the second one. So, in baseball, I used to play baseball my whole life growing up to almost playing in college, but I ended up taking the soccer route instead. But the feeling of connecting with a baseball and hitting a home run is something that, it's unmatched in anything else. Is there any sort of thing in your new career that, kind of matches that feeling of hitting a home run or connecting with the ball cleanly?
No.
Nice.
So, yeah, it was interesting so I got into school and somebody's like, oh, is this like getting called up to the major leagues? I was like, no. I was like, because when I was 5 years old, do you think I was like, hey, if I got into this business school, and so I think that's where part of the athlete transition is understanding that those feelings aren't going to, or those experiences just aren't going to be there, and just being okay with it. And understanding that everything, it's not a binary of like, hey, this is what I used to do, I'm never going to have that high again. But everything that all the discipline and process and hard work that I put into that process that I created, that is transferable. That's the portable thing that I'm going to still do. And one of the things, yes, the home runs were great, the few that I hit. But the love of like preparation and training and all that stuff and preparing on that day-to-day basis and competing was really part of the things that you love about being a professional athlete. And so that's the difficult thing of, I guess the transition is finding that new area that new direction or kind of area to apply that skill set to. But once you find that, you'll get it in your rhythm, you get it in a process, and it'll be, it's as similar as it can be.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nice question, Trevor. Thank you. All right, I'm just going to ask one or two more questions, and I want to dive in a little bit more to about the work you're doing now with X10, because as I've told you before, I think it's really very fascinating. But Matt, why don't you jump on in and ask your a question or two, if you could, real quick. And there we go. Hey, Matt.
So the first question was off one of your comments about being traded. Is there someone who was the best player that you were involved in a trade with or for? Do you remember?
Nomar. In 2004, there was a 4-team trade from the Expos, the Twins, the Cubs, Red Sox, Expos, Twins, Cubs. Yeah. And Red Sox, Expos, Twins, Cubs. And so it's a 4-way deal. And again, another reminder, the way the information traveled, I got called in the office and he said, hey, there's been a 4-team deal. You're either going to Minnesota or Montreal. I haven't gotten word yet of where you're going to go. And I was like, so man, that's an all-time hang with him. And so I said, all right, I got to hang here. So I started essentially packing my stuff, and then I got a call from Montreal. But that was where Nomar went from went from the Red Sox to the Cubs, and then Alex Gonzalez, and they got Orlando Cabrera, I believe, in that deal, they ended up that was the year they won it. So
well, it's good to be on a team that doesn't exist anymore. That's kind of cool, right? Sort of. My other question was, because I was looking at your resume and your real estate stuff, the company is Clark Griswold. So my question was, what's your favorite Clark Griswold word? But a quick story, I named a company that I did, which wasn't really going to be anything, Vandelay Consulting or Seinfeld. And the funny thing is, if you get it, it's funny, right? And if you don't, then it's no harm, no foul. But I was on an interview one time when someone was like giving me the business for naming my, company Vandelay. So I guess the movie's fine, but what's the story behind the Clark Griswold real estate?
I have a couple rental properties now, but at the time, I wanted to incorporate it, and after I moved out of it, incorporate it. And so I was working with a real estate attorney on the specifics of that, and he said, all right, would you want to have a name? And I said, all right, how about just Harris Realty or Brendan Harris Realty? And he kind of goes with, he's like, that's taken, you can't do that. And so I was ironically wearing a Cousin Eddie's RV t-shirt, and it was after the season, so it was like it was in the off season, so it was like early December, so it was actually around Christmas time. And I just kind of said, all right, how about Clark Griswold Real Estate? And he looks up and he goes, hey, that's open, man. And so I said, all right, let's go with it. And so I actually had the articles of incorporation over there on the wall. But in terms of insurance for it, it's really interesting where I will get calls and they'll ask to talk to Mr. Griswold and about my properties.
I love it. All right, well, do you have a favorite Clark Griswold movie?
Excuse me?
Favorite Clark Griswold movie?
I mean, Christmas Vacation.
Yeah. Vegas Vacation, very underrated for me. It gets funnier every time I watch it. And I know it got a bad rap, but anyway, appreciate your time. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Matt. All right. You can't go wrong with Christmas Vacation, but all of them are great. I mean, everyone loves that slapstick stuff. Caddyshack's great, although that's not Clark Griswold, but it should have been. Look, I just want to ask one more question. I'm going to have Danielle come in, and then we'll talk, I promise, about the other stuff. So hang on. Danielle, why don't you come on in and ask your question if you could. It's a good question. And by the way, ask her where she's calling in from.
I'm calling in from Jerusalem, Israel. So it's a bit late here, but I'm always happy to be at a Clubroom event. Thank you, Mark. But my question is, what was a lesson or a skill that you used when you played baseball that you were able to take from your athletic experience to your post-athlete professional experience?
I think I guess the work ethic and the discipline are kind of broad themes that are easy answers, but the more I'm in, I'd say, the corporate world and the venture world, it's the ability to deal with adversity. I feel like nobody can take one on the chin and just turn the page and not take things personally and move on. I like to tell people, like, try rolling out an 0 for 15 and then getting an ace the next day, and like try, and trying to get a good night's sleep and stay positive and things like that. So I think the ability to just perform and have things not go your way, but stay positive and be able to constructively criticize yourself and make adjustments and then get back out there, with a positive and still aggressive type demeanor the next day. So I think, the ability to compartmentalize adversity and failure and just be able to kind of do it with a smile, or at least with a clear head.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, great question. Thanks, Tanya. So, all right, let's before we jump into one more question, real quick, let's talk about X10 because I'm really fascinated by that whole model and how it works. But for those of you out there who don't know what Brendan is doing now, the short version is that Brendan's with a company that is really more of a I guess you'd say a PE firm, right? But they're focused on really going after is the wrong term, but enlisting ball players who've played a couple years to commit to offering future earnings in exchange for increasing their performance and their capabilities on the field. And I'm assuming off goes along with that a little bit. But Brendan, tell me a little bit more. Let's say let's say I've played for, I had a very successful rookie year, and it's clear that I've got some solid skills that'll translate into a hopefully 5 to 10 years career. What is it that you and your company and what you're doing now, what would you want to talk to me about?
So fundamentally, our thesis is we're a private equity company that's going to invest in Major League Baseball players and NFL players at early stage of their career for percentage of future earnings. So our primary goal is to work with athletes, improve their lives off the field, and help them not only play better, but kind of essentially become more valuable on the field. So there's a couple different ways that we can kind of provide value. First is it's very common in Major League Baseball for these small mid-market teams for a guy to play one good year and then try to offer them an extension, which is really 40, 50 cents on the dollar from what their fair market value would be if they wait. So the leverage just is so imbalanced in terms of these guys getting $15,000, $20,000 in the minor leagues, and then they come up and they get offered a 4 or 5 year deal for $20, $25 million. It's hard to turn down for a lot of these guys. So we feel like a capital infusion is going to give them some financial security and leverage to turn that deal down, but to kind of wait and accrue service time. The closer they get to free agency, that deal is going to become 4 or 5 year deals for $75, $80 million. It's just going to expand that pie a little bit. Second aspect that we're going to help our guys with is, and I think every athlete has a story like this, when they get called up to the major leagues, they see these guys, these veteran guys that just have the routine and process locked in, right? They're disciplined with their nutrition. They know specifically what workouts they're going to do with their pregame prep, with their off season, and everything is kind of locked in. And we want to give these guys the startup capital to start treating themselves as a small business that needs growth capital, so that they can put all those things in place and play better now, but also put the pieces in place to play 10 years. Right. So we're in a unique position where we're different from the team, where we can say to a guy, listen, how long do you want to play and how much money do you want to make? As opposed to the team saying, like, well, how are you going to help us next year? How do you fit into our plans? And so, I work mainly on the development side with our guys, and how a lot of these guys are 24, 25, and have to kind of introduce some of these tools, whether it's, improved nutrition or working with a nutritionist or some of these different recovery techniques that may not pay dividends for a couple years down the line, But my goal isn't just to extend their careers, to extend their prime, right? And in the prime, and another way for that is your upside earning years, right? So I want them going into free agency where a team can't point to any signs of regression. So whether it's their velocity, whether it's their exit, all those things have been maintained to a level that they're going to be paid top dollar in free agency. So, so in a nutshell, I can go through a little bit of our process in terms of how we price guys and things like that. But that's kind of from a high level what we're doing.
And I mean, you mentioned the prime years. So I mean, typically, I think what they say is usually the age 27 or 26. What's usually considered sort of the give or take, or what do you think it is?
In terms of when guys will start regressing, or
well, I mean, it's sort of a plateau. Not plateaus because it's the wrong way to use it, but
I'd say 29 or 30. The more guys see guys now, they can still do everything at that level at 29, 30. They might be a little bit more injury prone. That up a little bit, but I would say until I know from my point of view, I didn't notice. There were some things in terms of driving balls to the opposite field that used to kind of bounce off the wall or go out that I noticed weren't going as far, probably around 32. But also,
well, it was the bigger ballparks, Brandon. That's why.
Yeah, they hadn't been juicing the balls by that.
That's right.
But yeah, so 29, 30 maybe.
But I think that part of the sell that you guys would have is that you would ideally if the ball player comes in under your care, your umbrella, your whatever it is, that extends out, that stretches out. So conceptually, their regression may not start until 32, 33, 34, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the goal we're trying to do. And a lot of times it's using the tools and tech and best practices that are now readily available in sports tech. And it's been fascinating. That was the great experience for me at 76 Capitals, getting a feel for what's out there in sports tech and just little things where guys are like, hey, I've had my workouts, I do this and this Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday. It's like, well, we can also use, whether it's a Whoop, an Aura, or a Elite HRV, and we can monitor that and see when, how your recovery is going, and maybe that's not the best way to do that, or at least you just need be a little bit more flexible in terms of optimizing your workouts and your training.
That's interesting. So one of the questions here is pertinent. So do you think it was smart for teams like the Braves with Acuna and White Sox with Luis Robert to send them to big money, or do you think they would have still benefit from you in X10?
I mean, they clearly would have benefited by doing an X10 deal. There's a couple examples. Look at Christian Yelich and Mookie Betts. Now, there's no violin music playing for Christian Yelich, but he took an early deal with the Marlins for about a $60 million deal. And then he just got that deal extended to, I think, $200 or so million. But Mookie Betts, arguably both MVPs, and I would put them in the same comp set, even though if I was starting a team, I'd take Mookie Betts. But he's signed for a 300 plus, maybe 400. I'm not sure, but he signed for almost double what his career earnings will be, almost double with Christian Yelich, because he took that early pre-arbitration deal. Another example: Madison Bumgarner, Clayton Kershaw. He's going to make double. Clayton Kershaw, granted, did have a better career, but Madison Bumgarner's been a money postseason pitcher. That being said, he shouldn't be making half of what Clayton made in his career in totality. So, I think that is our value prop, where we can say, give these guys the leverage to wait. The Ozzie Albies deal is another one where, I think he could have really, very, very dynamic player, could have really cashed in if he had waited.
How hard is it to really be able to sort of intersect with these guys and tell them about this before they do that? I mean, is it something where, do you feel that it might be an agent thing where some of their agents are just so amped up to make the deal now that they want the money now versus later, or what do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, look, some of these smaller agents only have 2 players. That locks in the commission, and it's a real thing, and nothing against the. I mean, some of these guys are worried that they're going to get their guy all the way to free agency. He's going to leave for Scott Boras,
Yeah.
And so they lock that commission in, and they do the best they can, and they take it. From from our point of view, we have pretty good relationships with most of the agents and the financial advisors. And from our position, we don't go directly to the player. We bring, if there's a referral, from a teammate that says, hey, this is a guy, would be a good deal, we will. But we want all the legs of the stool, the agent, the financial advisor, the player, his wife, everybody in on the mechanics of the deal, how it's going to work, how it's going to benefit them. So, so everybody's above board. And we've made enough of our network so that I think we have access to most of the agents and people in the deal. So I'm getting a little.
The sun's falling. At least you got sunlight. I don't know what the rest of the country's under siege. So let's because we can obviously dig really deep into a lot of this stuff, which we can maybe do a little bit afterwards at the tables and so forth. But in terms of one of the questions that is over here also is that, with MLB and the licensing deal that they signed with the players, where the league owns everything instead of the players, what's going on and what's your feeling on all that?
Well, you get a licensing check each year. The players will, right? I think.
But what's that? Is that like everybody gets the same amount, or is that based on metric stats, et cetera? Or, I mean, does Aaron Judge get the same one as whoever?
No, everybody gets the same amount. I was a player rep back in the day. I know at least 1 year Barry Bonds had opted out and did his own deal. But for the most part, everybody gets the same. Look, I think there are some growth opportunities. I feel like the NFL, like I said, the NFL and the NBA have. No, I don't want to assume. I think that MLB is going in the right direction. I think they have, because of the antitrust exemption, they have been a primarily labor organization, right? For the large part of their existence, and are incredibly valuable and successful. From a player's point of view, yeah, I know there's been work stoppages, but in terms of the way they've represented players, has been outstanding. So I think they are moving into an area that they do look at it with growth opportunities, and I think in the next few years you're going to see that those opportunities go through the roof. I don't know the specifics of the latest deal, but largely I think they're heading in the right direction.
Well, look, now you see, obviously, with name, image, likeness coming into play with the younger players and so forth, and collegiate and so on, it's now more than ever, and this has been the emphasis on branding and marketing, because that's really where a lot of these, and it's not just the LeBrons of the world that are making a killing. It's the it's now you can have the backup catcher that is being endorsed by, even if it's a local a community bank or whatever it is, but now that they can really make a nice little addition to their check. So it's interesting to see that. Should we get you some shades real quick?
No.
All right. Hey, Nick, why don't you come on in? I know you had a couple questions, but why don't you ask one of them that we can drill down a bit on? Maybe. Come on, Nick. Andale. Here we go.
I'm working on it. Where, I don't even remember the last question, but I know it was the best one. With the Kershaw and the Betts examples, do you think that was because they signed with things? Milwaukee still missed out on a bunch of money. Do you think the team market has a play in how much money they're making, or do you think it was poor management of their contracts?
It's an interesting point. You don't see the Yankees and the Dodgers doing these pre-arb deals to lock guys up. They just don't have to do that, right? So even though I think with a year or two out before he hit free agency, I want to say Boston did make some considerable offers. Yeah, but they didn't do it after 1 or 2 years. They did it after 4 or 5 years. The Dodgers may have done a similar thing in terms of maybe made an offer after 4 or 5 years, and then, finally got to a point where like our franchise guy, we're going to lock him in. But yeah, obviously the Marlins had to have to make those deals to survive. I want to say they did the Stanton deal, but that was something that he was never going to play the entire career there after that deal.
Right.
But and then obviously they couldn't afford Ozuna, so they couldn't afford JT Realmuto, and yeah, some of the market is just they're not going to offer those guys those deals, and then so it's not even an option for some of those guys.
Well, I think it's and think about the fan base. I mean, how they must feel with Tampa unloading everybody, the Marlins in the past unloading people, and so forth. And it's just it's got to be frustrating as all hell to reach the sort of almost the apex, or winning the series, or being in the series, and so forth, and then having a team dismantled. Is there? I mean. And it's hard to see a way around some of that, because you may have, even if you were to have salary caps at some point, which I don't think anybody really wants, you've got still some of these teams are making so much on the media deals that they have that flexibility. Yes, network,
They have a de facto capper now with the luxury tax, right? And that was the last deal was too low. They probably could have gotten $220 million for it. Instead they settled at 200. And so now those teams that are at the cap are you're taking them off the table in terms of free agency. So that's just supply and demand in terms of how many teams are going to be bidding on these free agents. They didn't get a floor. So you're going to get Kansas City, you're going to get the Marlins that are just going to spend, if they can say, hey, we're rebuilding, and, kind of pocket the revenue sharing money, pocket the TV money. And then, they realize, all right, what's the difference between rolling out 70 wins and 78 wins? It's going to cost us $15 million more. That's not really worth it for us to do that. So they, instead of rolling out a $35-40 million baseline deal, they're allowed to do kind of $25-30 million payrolls.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see a lot of that happening. But I think Major League Baseball as a whole is okay with that, clearly. But that's interesting. Well, look, let's do this because I want to make sure we have a chance to do a little bit of chatting back at the tables. But I truly appreciate all your time, and it's really fascinating to hear what you're doing with X10. But also, you have obviously a very deep understanding of the game itself, but also of what happens behind the scenes. You've been part of player development, player rep, and so forth. So I think it's really interesting to have somebody like you, future commissioner of baseball. You're like, no thanks.
I'm outside the game now. I got out, and I'm very happy. Not looking to get back in.
I got it. Anyway, look, just real quick, couple things. Number one, everyone will be able to see this recording on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, the Win Again Academy YouTube channel. You can find it, and also thanks I really appreciate you being here. What do you think of this platform here?
That's great. I like it. Yeah, it's interesting to be able to kind of just network and go in and out of the tables, and I like it.
Cool. Appreciate the endorsement. Anyway, there'll be no royalty check for that. Sorry. But anyway, thanks again for everything. Appreciate it, Brendan. And we're going to bounce back, and we'll talk soon back there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anytime.
All right. Thanks for being part of the Clubroom event today. It's been great having you on board. Check out all the resources available to the Win Again Academy. Go to the website, markmoyer.com, and you'll see all the previous events, podcast episodes, articles, and so much more. Check it out. And look, if you're an athlete, if you're an entrepreneur and a founder, or an executive looking to elevate your game and really take your business and your career to a whole new level, consider becoming a Win Again Academy member. We'd love to have you on board because you get access 24/7 to an incredible Slack community of other members where you can really elevate your network and meet some really impressive people. You'll also get a personalized copy of my book, Win Again, the job search handbook for athletes and non-athletes looking to really transform their life and their career. You'll also get seamless entry into the Clubroom events. And these events are absolutely amazing. Table-to-table networking, conversations with everybody at your own pace. It really is fun, but also incredibly great for your network. You've got to check those out. You'll also get discounts to future VIP events that we've got lined up. So consider joining, be a part of this community, be a part of that Slack channel, come to these events. You'll meet some amazing people, go to markmoyer.com/join-today and take advantage of all the things that you have to offer for an incredibly, incredibly great price. Check it out. We'd love to see you there, and see you in the club room soon. Thanks.